All right, CNT125, we are doing our virtualization and cloud computing lab along with chapter 7. So I've downloaded a copy of the lab here, have it open, ready to go. Always with labs, do a scan through the whole thing so you know, take some notes, make sure you're ready when you arrive in the lab room. All right, the first part of the lab, we're going to build a virtual machine and work with it. So this first podcast is going to get us started there. First area you notice we would need to install the hypervisor. Now this is a link to if you want to do this in another machine, another location. We've already done that for you. Here is our hypervisor. Here's VMware Workstation. This is already installed on your workstation, so we do not need to install that. Just letting you know that that would be the first piece you need to do. The second thing, you would need your operating system. Well, we've already downloaded a Linux ISO for you. We have that here downloaded already, so I'm going to open up my file browser. Actually, we'll do it this way. I'll open my file browser. I'm going to go to, if I go to this PC, to the C drive here, there's a folder in here called CNT Apps. We're going to open that. That's where we have a lot of our executables for various programs we have installed. There is the Linux Mint 21 ISO. We downloaded that in the fall. We're going to use that yet this semester. It'll be fine. So there's the ISO that we're going to use, and that saves us the trouble of all of us trying to download that in the lab room at the same time. So there's the ISO ready to go. But you would need to do that in real life, maybe on your home machine. So we're now going to launch the VMware Workstation Player. That's our hypervisor. This guy right here. Here was the link on the desktop. Kind of looks like a yellow X with arrows, if you will. We're going to launch that, and we're going to create a new virtual machine. There's ones here already. Here's one for 220 class, and here's one for our class that we're going to use later this semester. I have special stuff installed on there for a future lab. We're going to build our own. So out here, I'm going to create a new virtual machine. And I'm going to do it using the ISO that we have downloaded. So I'm going to select the option for installer disk image, ISO file. We're going to browse for that. And I'm going to go to, again, if it's not there, if it doesn't point to it directly, go to C drive, CNT apps, and we're looking for 21. 19 is an older one. That's the one that the NMS over here is built on. So I leave that there as a just in case. So we're going to select the Linux Mint 21. Once I've done that, we'll need to indicate what version of Linux it is. So we'll do next here, and we'll hit the option for Linux, and we'll make sure we're selecting the 5.0 later kernel 64-bit. Once we do that, we'll select next. Here we're going to give the virtual machine a name. So here we'll put in, I'm going to suggest using like CNT125. Use your name. In this case, I'm going to use Brown for my last name, but use your name. And then something in here like Linux Mint. That way you know it's this class for this person and what it is. Because there will be more than one virtual machine on here in a week or two as different classes build theirs. So you want to make sure you've identified our class and your name and then like Linux Mint on the end. We'll leave the location alone. We'll say next. This is the amount of disk drive space we're going to allocate to the VM. So I'm actually going to double this so I have some room to install and save some things. 16 should be fine. We're going to make it a single file just for storage purposes. We're going to say next. Now, don't say finish yet. We want to customize this hardware. We're going to increase our memory, and we're going to adjust our network adapter. So we'll do customize hardware. In here, for memory, let's go to at least 2 gigs. So I'm going to click 2. Now remember, the more we allocate to this virtual machine, the more we're taking away from the host machine. So we do need to balance because this is our hypervisor sitting on top of, in this case, the Windows operating system. So the more we allocate to our virtual machine, the less our host machine has. So we're gonna just bump it up a little bit so it runs a little snappier. We're going to come down to network adapter. It's currently set for NAT. Let's set it for bridged. And I want to do replicate so it looks like it's connected to the network. And I'm going to make sure it's bridged to only the Intel NIC that's on here. So I'm going to do configure adapters. And I'm going to make sure it's only to our Intel NIC and not any of these other things that are here, especially the wireless or whatever. Just the wired Intel Ethernet NIC. So we'll say OK. And now I can say close. And I'll say finish here, and I basically have it created. It's not installed and running or anything, but it's created, if you will. So what we'll do now, we're going to launch this. So we'll highlight this guy and we'll say play. This is now going to boot it using that ISO image. If you get a choice here, just pick the default option there. We're going to let that boot. If your pointer ever gets stuck in the virtual machine, if you do Control-Alt, it basically frees it up. So if I were to click in there now, my pointer's stuck in there. If I do Control-Alt, that'll pop that out, so my pointer now has access to my regular desktop. We're going to finish letting this boot. And at this point, it's like booted, but it's not actually installed. So then we're actually going to install the operating system on this virtual machine. So I'm going to let it boot. If it takes much longer, I'll pause while it's booting. Alright, I paused there for about 10-15 seconds so you didn't have to watch the machine finish booting. So there is my Linux Mint desktop, but it's just running off of this live ISO. It's not actually installed. So before going any further, let's install this guy. So we'll double click on the Install Linux Mint. I'm going to walk you through the install process here to get it going. And then once it's doing the actual install, we'll pause and let it install so you're not just watching this install away here. All right, we're going to get it started, and we'll need to select a bunch of options, and name it and so forth, and then let it do the install. All right, so here we go. We'll use our English as our language, continue. We'll select the keyboard, language, English, so forth, continue. If you pick out the languages, Mr. Brown's not going to be able to help much, just so you know. We'll install the multimedia codecs, that's fine. We'll do a couple other settings here and then let it run its install. We're down here. We'll indicate that we're going to install this. Actually, we're right there. Erase and install Linux Mint. That's fine. It's actually going to allocate a little space in the hard drive for this, and it's going to install in that little space on the hard drive, which is fine. And it's going to verify we want this partition table. Yep, we'll say continue. We'll select that this is the time zone we're in, New York. Yep. All right, in here for name, I'm just going to put in my actual name. Okay. Now, the computer name it comes up with, just leave that default. That's fine. That'll be your virtual machine. I'm going to leave that as my username. And for password, please use CNT class or password. If you pick other stuff, I won't be able to help you. But if we use one of these default ones in here, it's something that I can help you with or remind you if you forget. So I'm actually going to use CNT class, just like the desktops in here. CNT class. I know if we were going to be secure, we would do much more secure passwords, but then I'm not able to help you. We'll do login automatically, and we'll do continue. And now, it's actually going to do the install. I'm going to pause for the 2 or 3 minutes it's going to take to do this, so you don't have to wait. When it comes up to the option for restart now, I will pick up and continue recording. Alright, just a couple minutes there. I waited while it was installing. You'll need to do the same. Once it's done installing, it's going to say, hey, do you want to continue testing or restart? I'm actually going to do restart. I want this to reboot and basically be an installed virtual machine that we'd use, just like we'd be installing the operating system on a machine. It's then going to ask me, please remove the installation media, like, you know, eject the CD or DVD that we use to install it, and hit enter. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit enter. And this is where I might need to use the Control-Alt key to bounce my mouse out here so I have it free. That's a little tip when you're working with your VM here. We're going to let this reboot and come up to basically the home page, the desktop, if you will, and then we can be able to start working with this guy. I'm going to wait just a minute while it's installing here, or loading, I should say, loading. Again, if I wait too long, I'll pause. If we end up having to wait too long, I'll pause. I'll resize the desktop here a little bit. There we go, and it booted right around. There we go. So there is my desktop of my Linux virtual machine. This is my welcome screen. I'm going to uncheck that because I don't want that showing every time it loads. I will close that out. Let's just do a quick orientation of what we got here. This is laid out very similar to most operating systems now. Down here in the corner where my logo is, that's where I'm going to get access to pretty much all my utilities. And I can even search for them up here. But here's groups of utilities or apps, and then under that category are specifics. And again, you're going to find it here. It's just probably going to be named differently, or maybe in a different location that we're used to. Okay, so that's where all my utilities are. Here's, my home folder for saving files. Down here in the bottom, there's my browser. There's my Firefox browser. I should be able to open that and have access to internet or whatever. So I'm going to open my browser real quick. I'll do a test, and I'll try to do something like, let's go to www.hack.edu and try that we have access. And we do. Yay! Look at that. So there's my browser. I'm going to close that out for now. Down here in the bottom bar, this is my command prompt. They call it terminal, but there's my command prompt. Okay, we're going to end up using that. And then here would be my where my files, like my home folder, if you will. This would be my file system for saving my files. Down here in the bottom right, a lot of the icons you're used to. Time, here's your volume, here's my network adapter. There's my network adapter. That's the main one we're going to end up using. All right, now that we have it installed, we're going to work with this a little bit. I'm going to come back in the next podcast, and we're going to look at the IP settings that are here, make some changes, try some things, and work with the network settings on this. So we'll come back in the next podcast and do that.